Greetings, Starfighters. Dan here. Just wanted to say thanks for listening, giving this little podcast of ours a chance, giving it a shot. Speaking of shot, you might notice that my audio in the Mad Max episode sounds a little, shot. That's because I made a mistake and accidentally, when John and I recorded using the built-in microphone on my MacBook Air, which is not the most up-to-date technology. So, as Alanis Morissette says, you live, you learn, and in the future, I will be more cautious. Thanks again for joining us. Good journey.
David Pyrie of Time Out says the tone in the first film of this series sometimes wavers into self-parody, and there are occasional crude patches, but overall, this edge-of-the-seat revenge movie marks the most exciting debut from an Australian director since Peter Weir. Vincent Canby of the New York Times calls its sequel an extravagant film fantasy that looks like a sadomasochistic comic book come to life. Michael Wilmington of the Los Angeles Times says the third film in this franchise closes the trilogy like a lightning blast followed by the ominous resonant drone of thunder, not knowing that the adventure continues with the fourth film that film critic Christy Lemire poetically claims will melt your face off. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we discuss the legacy of Mad Max.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? The Ruined Childhoods Podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters! Welcome to a post-apocalyptic edition of Ruined Childhoods.
That isn't to say that our trip was a total disaster, but anytime you're traveling with a 2-year-old and a 5.5-year-old, things can get a little dicey. But we all survived. The world didn't explode. There wasn't a giant catastrophe. There was no nuclear bomb.
Though we would potentially have been the first to know about it because of where we were.
Hawaii's national emergency system, I guess.
The giant radar.
Yeah.
That, as we were told, is specifically for North Korea.
Right. Yes. Our father dropped some knowledge on us numerous times.
A couple of times.
Yeah. We also learned about something having to do with the Pro Bowl.
Oh, yeah. They played that there, or used to play it there.
Yeah, our last episode, if anybody hasn't heard it, was recorded for the first and so far only time where Dan and I were in the same room together recording an episode, along with my wonderful spouse, Laura, where we discussed Soap Dish and her inability to remember any actors' names.
But her gift of creating new names out of the actors' names that she kind of remembers.
I'm glad that you witnessed it in action.
It was amazing.
It's amazing.
I literally watched the pieces of the puzzle squeeze together.
And
it's like when you get those two puzzle pieces and you're like, God damn it, I know this is not the right fit, but it's so close.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. I hope that it translates as well over podcast audio than as it did in person. That was a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to doing more episodes where we are actually together whenever we can make that happen, and also with guests, because that's a fun addition. I mean, we've done it once before with Scott, our brother.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think that if we ever, dare to dream, pie in the sky, if we ever do a live show, we must have Laura, because regardless of whether or not it translates to audio, watching the process of how she gets how she pulls together the names is just so impressive, and what she comes up with is so wrong yet so right.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Okay, so Anyway.
Yeah. Well, what's up?
We have a guest. Guest at the end of this episode.
At the end of this episode, stick around, whatever. Keep on listening.
Don't turn that dial.
We have an interview that I did maybe month or so back with a documentary filmmaker whose work is very closely tied with this episode's theme. So we'll get to that soon, and we'll probably mention some things that will come up during that interview. But first, there's really one bit of news in the reboot, sequel, prequel, whatever world, but it's a big one, and that's that Matrix 4 is going to be happening.
With Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss.
Yes. So it's funny because my first thought is something that I later read in someone else's tweet. So it's like, okay, we're all on board with the fact that this is already the second best Matrix movie, and it hasn't even been, close to being made yet. But we all know that, like, man, it's in such a good position to be incredible.
Well, and it's kind of like how I was thinking yesterday, because yesterday, August 21st, our mom's birthday, by the way, and our parents' anniversary. And also 1 year to the day that Bill and Ted Face the Musical hit theaters. And I thought to myself, I was like, I think if they put tickets on sale for it today, it would already outgross Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. All due respect to those movies.
You're probably right.
I think it's so awaited, and Keanu Reeves, kind of the path of his career, and I mean, really, it seems I don't know, I haven't read too many interviews with him, but it seems like he's kind of, he took some time away, and John Wick really.
Well, we're in the midst of the Keanu-sance.
The Keanu-sance, yes. The Reeves-naissance. No, the Keanu-sance.
I like Keanu-sance better.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly was a successful actor, in the 90s, but he didn't really have the status that he had now, and I think a lot of that is because of social media. I think it's because of the world of fandom that has kind of circulated.
I think also because, and to kind of pile into the social media thing, but I've read so many stories and heard of so many little incidents of Keanu Reeves just not just being a decent person, but kind of like using the status that he has, the celebrity that he has, to facilitate being a nice person. Like I read a story where he was driving past this house, and there was a sign outside, and it said, "You're breathtaking." And he stopped, went over. No one, I don't think anyone was home at that point, but he signed the sign, and then went back later to take pictures with the family. And he's not, it's not, we're not going to start calling him Saint Keanu, but, just the fact that he is uses the fact that he really doesn't personally have much to worry about in life himself. Like, he's doing all right. And he knows that he doesn't have to do much to really make somebody else's day a whole lot better.
Well, this has been something that's kind of trickled out a little bit, but under the radar, secretly has been financing a children's hospital. So,
okay. All right. So maybe we should start calling him Saint Keanu. Okay. I don't think I have any say in the matter, but I'm all for it.
And I think, so we've mentioned this on the podcast before, but we are incredibly huge fans of the movie Parenthood, where he is absolutely incredible. He is just one of many amazing actors in this perfect ensemble cast. And in this movie, he plays he does like drag racing, like kind of on a semi-professional local level. And, you know, that ties in really well with what we're going to be talking about today, which is a series of movies that have found themselves. Oh, I just activated Siri somehow. That's funny. I wonder what it's going to say. Hold on. Stand by. Nope, it's just thinking. I was wondering if it was going to say something interesting. Anyway, so
you have something to add? No?
Well, yeah, it's these movies that from the second film on have kind of centered themselves around these wild, crazy driving sequences. Well, the first one did have, and I haven't watched the first one in a while, so. But it does center around a motorcycle gang.
I had a question for you because you mentioned a crazy series of movies, and I wanted to know if you had seen the newest trailer for Rambo, Final Blood, Last Blood.
You know, Dan, I am not as much of a mega fan of the Rambo series as you are. You love bringing up the Rambo sequels.
It's just because it just fascinates me. And
is there a Mad Maxy car chase sequence in that?
Yes, in the way that there's explosions and cars and one guy who's like just batshit crazy going off the rails and just killing a bunch of people.
Oh, only one? Let me tell you about a movie called Mad Max.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to let everyone know there's a new trailer for the Rambo movie, and I don't know. Whatever. It's like they're never going to stop.
No. Well, and by they you mean Sylvester Stallone will never stop. And his characters. And his two main go-to characters will never stop.
I mean, I don't think we'll see Stop or My Mom Will Shoot Again.
Well, R.I.P. Estelle Getty. That's all I got to say about that.
Fact.
So maybe it'll be like Stop or My Daughter Will Shoot.
Stop or My Granddaughter, really.
Granddaughter Will Shoot. Ooh.
Well,
okay.
That's actually pretty much the plot of the new. That's actually the plot of the new Rocky. It's his niece. It's Stop or My Niece Will Shoot because his niece gets kidnapped by a cartel. Because they're like, oh, hey, you know who lives in that house over there? Rambo. No kidding. Oh, well, we should mess with him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course we should. Let's kidnap his niece. All right. On to Mad Max.
Okay, so we're going to just say right off the bat, clearly this is not a movie or a series of movies that really needs to be debated in terms of furthering it with sequels and reboots or remakes because we are in that territory. If we did this in 2013 or something, then it would be a different story because Fury Road wasn't a thing at that point. It was a series that had ended in 85. There were graphic novels, maybe?
Well, there was the Fury Road graphic novels, but I do remember over the years, there was always rumor and innuendo that there would be another Mad Max. And for a while, it was still, like, I'm talking for a good while, was still going to be Mel Gibson. And I don't think the Tom Hardy talk started until maybe around, 2030, maybe like after Inception, so 2010.
Yeah. So I know that also there were talks of doing a continuation of the series around 2001, but that got pushed back because of September 11th happening. And then there were talks around 2000. I guess it probably would have been around that time, maybe a little later, 2003 or so, that like Heath Ledger was possibly going to be, coming back as the new Mad Max. And he was Australian, right?
He was Australian,
so that would kind of fit. And I thought that when I read that, I was like, oh, he would have been great as Mad Max. I mean,
well, he played Mel Gibson's son in The Patriot.
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
That was funny. Kind of his that and 10 Things I Hate About You. Those were his breakouts.
And, well, also in when it was first being discussed for a new part of the series with Mel Gibson, allegedly that was squashed because of Mel Gibson's tirades. Yes.
Yeah.
So that got shelved because of all that stuff that was going on with Mel Gibson.
Or
was that
2005?
Was that
around
then?
Well, was that before? Was that because Passion of the Christ was 2004? So that was really kind of the
right around that time.
Mel Gibson might be an anti-Semite. That was around that time.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the other we're talking about like when he gets arrested.
I'm talking sugar tits. Yeah.
Sugar tits. Yes, sugar tits and Jews control Hollywood.
Yep.
That might have been around 07, 08.
Okay.
No, it had to be before that.
I think so. I think it was before then. Anyway, so there were a lot of talks about bringing it back in some way or another for a while, but it really was a 30-year gap between. Okay, let's do a brief history of the Mad Max films. Was it 79 that? 1979. Mad Max is made, shoestring budget. Mel Gibson is, I think he was still in drama school at the time. He was unknown, especially in the U.S. I think maybe he'd done like one other thing. Period.
Gallipoli had not yet come, had it?
I don't believe so.
Right.
And and it was just this very under the radar movie that kind of did okay. Good enough for them to make Mad Max 2, which in the United States was called The Road Warrior. Now it's kind of known as Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. I think that at the time, not enough people knew about Mad Max for them to call it Mad Max 2 and have it be a success. But what's interesting is that I feel like kind of stands on its own. I guess maybe all these movies can really stand on their own. You don't necessarily need to see the movies before them to appreciate them and understand what's going on, because between Mad Max 1 and Mad Max 2, they feel very different. Mad Max 1, I believe that it is supposed to be post-apocalyptic, but it doesn't really have that feeling to it. Like, he is a police officer. He has police officer buddies. He goes to a police station. I believe that there's a few references to there being some sort of nuclear incident, but nothing.
We're not yet in the wasteland.
No, that's when that's where we are starting in Mad Max 2, where there's this road warrior. He is this guy who's just out there looking for gasoline, meets this dude who built a helicopter who tells him where you can find gasoline, sees this village that's being terrorized by this gang, and he basically goes in saying, like, you give me gasoline, I'll take care of this for you. And
so they give us the 1,000 pesos. Oh, so it's not Three Amigos.
Not Three Amigos, no. It's gang terrorizes small town.
It's a pretty standard.
And then you have Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which is probably, well, I think that when most people think of Mad Max, they think about the Road Warrior, because it's a lot of like the crazy cars, and it's that's the one where you have like Lord Humungus.
You got the mohawks, the muscles, like the big spiky. So the Road Warriors. So here's the first of two, because this is what I'm here for. Famed wrestling tag team, Hall of Famers, the Road Warriors.
Okay.
Their look was inspired by this movie. I don't know. I have to look into like whether it was them, whether it was Dusty Rhodes, who definitely saw Thunderdome, because he based War Games on Thunderdome. The War Games matches where you have two rings enclosed in a cage, and
oh wow, a Thunderdome.
It's like elimination, yeah. So, but that was inspired by Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and the characters of the Road Warriors, who would enter at one point in their career. They were entering on motorcycles, and they had like the big spiky shoulder pads, the like crazy makeup, that real post-apocalyptic look, that post-apocalyptic chic as is defined by the Mad Max series, but especially the Road Warrior.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like these days people have an idea in their head of what something looks like when it's post-apocalyptic, and I think that that's come up a lot more in movies since 79 or, early 80s. And it was really defined by these Mad Max movies, which is so wild. I mean, it's just the Australian outback, just like middle of nowhere.
It's funny. I watch these movies and I'm like, okay, so basically they're like, all right, we've got Australia. We're going to make a movie in Australia. It's my Australian accent.
Very nice.
And so they're, what kind of movie are you going to make? They look around and they're like, all right, post-apocalyptic wasteland where everybody, because of the nuclear fallout, of course, is freakishly attractive and fit, or just kind of weird looking, like the Bruce Pence, the pilot who builds the that's like, that was like he had like the look of like an Australian pop star, though.
It was like, yeah, I mean, a lot of this feels very like steampunk.
Yeah, which I'm not 100% what that is. I feel like it's a lot of leather and goggles.
Yeah, which, I mean, look at these movies.
What, I guess, yeah. If you're a punk, and yeah. But so the post-apocalyptic chic, and it's so funny, though, because we talk about Heath Ledger, and I was just thinking, I was like, damn, like, Australia basically has become this factory of, like, attractive, talented people for Hollywood. It's like, here you go.
Hemsworths.
Here's a Russell Crowe. Here, I got some Hemsworths for you. Yeah. Here's a Heath Ledger. Here's a Naomi Watts, a Nicole Kidman.
Right.
Like, and they're so like versatile. It's like Australians will be cast to play Americans in Australian movies. It's like, no, I mean, you think about it, and it's like, first, it's like, I mean, they're all just pretty. I mean, from Naomi Watts to Heath Ledger. But then you also think about just like the talent, and Hemsworths are not to be underrated. Chris Hemsworth for me has been a highlight of every Avengers movie he has been in. Oh,
he's great.
I look forward to seeing him play Hulk Hogan.
Oh, he's playing Hulk Hogan?
Yeah, he's playing the Hulkster.
He was really wonderful in Men in Black International, a movie that wasn't amazing, but his performance was great. Tessa Thompson was great. Kumail Nanjiani was great. And then he was also, I think he was really fun in the Paul Feig Ghostbusters movie.
Yeah.
I know that. Well, I feel like we've off mic talked about the Ghostbusters movies, especially that one, quite a bit. But I think that his performance is just fun.
No, I'm sure it is. He is charismatic and he's fun. And by the way, so then let's talk, why don't we, about Mel Gibson, because he is the franchise star of the original.
Right. He's the franchise star, but it works without him too, as we've learned.
Well, and we'll get to that. But first, I want to talk briefly just about kind of what he brings to the role, and we'll kind of ignore. Oh, by the way, that was 2006. Sugar Tits, 2006.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, among other wonderful rants. And I want in the episode description, I want it noted that the explicit is pretty much just because of Mel Gibson quotes. So
yeah, is that when wait, what was the one where he said that he was going to bury somebody in a rose garden or something?
I think
that was in a voicemail or something? I don't know. I feel like it was a recording that people dug up.
Oh, yes. I think it was his girlfriend Oksana. I think it was, in the voicemails, like the Mel Gibson voicemails. This is like, man, this is history for me. I remember listening to that. Those.
So anyway, you were talking about Mel Gibson and what he lent to the Mad Max franchise. Yeah.
And he does, and as he does also in Lethal Weapon, does a wonderful job of playing this man who's haunted by his past, who has known love and known what it is like to lose that love.
Sure. In Mad Max, his wife and daughter are killed by this motorcycle gang, and that he seeks vengeance upon. And,
in Lethal Weapon, it's she's hit by a car.
Right.
I think he's late to meet her. I don't know. Anyway, Mel Gibson does that really well. I think by the time we get to Mad Max 2, Road Warrior, whatever you call it, he kind of reaches this like stoic point. And then by Thunderdome, he's kind of like he's the reluctant hero. He's Han Solo saying like, oh, okay, fine, I'll save the day. He's a combination of that and Indiana Jones.
Well, Beyond Thunderdome is really Return of the Jedi, but it basically all takes place on Endor. You have, it's also like, it reminded me a lot of Hook, or like any kind of like Peter Pan movie that's just like the Neverland, the Lost Boys. Well, and hey, speaking of the Lost Boys, featuring Tim Capello on saxophone, all greased up in the beach party scene, who also plays saxophone on We Don't Need Another Hero, which if you watch the George Miller directed We Don't Need Another Hero, Beyond Thunderdome, Tina Turner music video, you'll see Tim Capello, who's kind of parodied on SNL by John Hamm with like the sexy saxophone player. And so Tim Capello, you should look him up. Do you know who I'm talking about, Dan?
Well, now I do. Yeah. When you say Lost Boys beach saxophone player, I know exactly who you're talking about.
So he is essentially the same in the We Don't Need Another Hero music video.
So, which is crazy. I thought of this other crazy connection, and it's just one of those, I think it's totally coincidence, random thing. But I'm gonna connect some dots for you here. So in Beyond Thunderdome, Tina Turner plays Auntie Entity, who really just goes by Auntie throughout the movie, and she's badass. Now, in the 1993 biopic What's Love Got to Do with It, Tina Turner was played by Angela Bassett, and one of the most famous lines in a scene with Angela Bassett from the movie Black Panther is when she's greeted by Killmonger, who says,
"Did she say we don't need another hero?" Oh, she says, "Hey, Auntie."
He says, "Hey, Auntie," to Angela Bassett.
I remember that. That's funny.
I mean, she's not dressed up like Tina Turner in
Do you think that is a slight weird reference, or really just, because she is his auntie?
I think it's really just in the story. I don't think anyone was
This is just you
like,
reading into it too much.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone on the set was reading that and was like, oh, yeah, because Angela Bassett plays this character, and she also played Tina Turner, and Tina Turner played Auntie in Beyond Thunderdome.
No, that's just you that makes those connections.
Although Black Panther and Killmonger do have kind of like a Thunderdome fight.
Two shall enter, one shall leave. So,
interesting.
And sorry, I started giving like brief synopses of these movies, like very, very super brief. So I didn't get to Beyond Thunderdome. Beyond Thunderdome, he is this, just roving guy whose car gets messed up by this guy who's, I don't know, the snake person. This weird guy that built an elevator. elevator.
He's the guy from the helicopter. Yeah, he's the guy with the helicopter. Well, I guess it technically does elevate you, so.
My brain is just fried. So they basically go check out this. Oh, wait. Sorry. The guy with the helicopter. He's flying a plane, not knowing who he is, but flies a plane over Mel Gibson and messes up his like camel-driven mobile. Yeah. It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
And ends up knocking him out, stealing off his stuff, and Max goes to this barter town to try to find his stuff and the guy who stole it, and then ends up being like drafted by Auntie to fight in the Thunderdome against Master Blaster, who is
she wants me to pick a fight.
Yeah, pick a fight and fight in the Thunderdome with Master Blaster, who is a 2-person, one very large, one very small unit. Master being the brains, the small guy who rides on the shoulders of Blaster, this big, dumb, beefy idiot.
For you literature lovers out there, it is like the most extreme interpretation of Lenny and George.
Oh, yeah.
Master being George, Lenny being Blaster.
Oh my God, you love Of Mice and Men so much.
I do love him. Look, when it's staring me in the face like that, when I'm like, oh, that's the character types.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is Max ends up fighting Blaster but refuses to kill him. He's then killed by Auntie's kind of henchman, and Max ends up getting exiled because he refuses to kill him. So he gets kind of exiled on a horse, tied with his hands behind his back, and is then found pretty much 95% dead in the desert by this...
by the Dinks.
The
Dink,
Dinks?
Dink, dink, dink. It's reminded me so much of Spaceballs. It reminded me so much of Spaceballs.
Oh, yeah, because she just pulls him across the desert. She combs the desert.
Maybe Spaceballs was parodying Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah, right. So these are essentially the Lost Boys who have found old, almost dead Peter Pan. And they are explaining to him that there was this prophecy that there was this pilot who would come to them, and they think that it's him because the kind of cave drawing looks like him. And
it's Captain Walker,
right?
But Captain Walker didn't come home, to quote The Who.
Oh my God. The Who with Tina Turner, the Acid Queen.
Oh, yeah. Tommy.
Anyway, this kind of these Lost Boys, for lack of a better term, are out to be saved, and Max kind of is like, all right, I know how to save the day, because what we didn't mention is that the Auntie wanted Master Blaster dead because Master Blaster is claiming control over all of Bartertown because he created all of the electricity using methane from pig shit. So he had this gigantic underground like sea of pigs that are just there to create
all these
shit.
Pigs.
Yeah.
And perhaps that was the moment that George Miller thought about the movie Babe and was like, I'd like to work with the pigs, maybe not so much the shit.
Yeah. George Miller.
Or maybe just one pig.
This is an appropriate time to mention that George Miller went on to direct Babe 2, Pig in the City, and Lorenzo's motherfucking Oil. I can't believe that we didn't think about that when we were talking about Lorenzo's Oil the last time, and knowing that we're going to be doing
sometimes
that next.
the dots just connect themselves for us. But yes, George Miller directed, and The Witches of Eastwick, by the way, another George Miller classic, Happy Feet. And and then the man just starts out with the Mad Max,
Yeah.
and then comes back with Fury Road.
Well, he starts his career out as an emergency room doctor.
Well, yes.
Well,
I meant his directing career.
Well, but it's what inspired him to make Mad Max, because he encountered so many motorcycle and car accidents. So anyway, there's that old thing, which comes up a little bit when in my interview with our guest later on, Faye Murman.
Yeah.
So
proper respect though to George Miller, quite a career.
Yeah, and I swear this, if we really wanted to, this podcast could really be called 6 Degrees of Lorenzo's Oil, and we could just talk about how each movie is connected to Lorenzo's Oil in 6 steps or less, which this has 1 step, George Miller. So Beyond Thunderdome, essentially he brings these kids back to Bartertown, and they end up kind of killing everybody who could be a problem and saving the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he just disappears.
He just rides off into the sunset.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
In Mad Max Fury Road, which takes place 40 years after the nuclear incident, that is when, oh man, this is just so wild. So Max, it's the same character, but played by Tom Hardy. It's never like, everyone just accepts it. It's totally okay. And when I say that, I don't mean in the movies. It's just like, somehow our culture has just approved this like replacement of the character of Max by Tom Hardy. And I feel like he was awesome in it. And you know, probably has the same number of lines of dialogue between each of the movies, you know, does not say very many words. What's up?
Right. But more what I thought Tom Hardy really brought to the role, and that really, I think, engaged me into Fury Road more so than and really any of the other Mel Gibson performances, was he brings this vulnerability, this humanity, he's not so stoic. He's more just like constantly trying to get a grip onto things, but he just can't.
Well, what he's in the narration, it states that his goal is just to survive. And that rings true in all of these, where it's like he kind of is this hero who's doing it just really so he can survive. He's helping people out, and it's not that he's, upset that or feeling burdened that he's doing it for all these other people, but it's like ultimately it's going to be really benefiting him in the long run. And he sees that. So in Mad Max Fury Road, he is kidnapped by these ravagers. I don't even know what you would call them, but he's taken to be a blood bag because he is a universal donor. Well, they find he's a universal donor, so he can be a blood bag for transfusions for the workers, the henchmen for Immortan Joe. This guy, this like crazy like monster man who controls this entire city, the Citadel, because he has tapped into a water source and can provide water to these people, but it's all on his terms when he wants to do it, and everybody kind of worships him as being the giver of this thing that he's basically saying, like, don't become addicted to this water. Like, as we all know, you need water to survive, and he's the only person that can give it to them.
Yeah. He says, don't become addicted. You're going to like go crazy for it.
Yeah.
And exactly what was happening. Yeah.
So he has this collection of wives who he is trying to impregnate in his little Jeffrey Epstein layer of spreading his seed across the land. And and Furiosa, who is drives a war rig that goes to the center to get gasoline, she has hatched this plan to bring them to kind of the promised land where she was born and grew up. That was the green place. And she has it from her memory, and she's worked out these deals along the path to gain access to get there. And her goal is to drive the war rig with these women stowed away to get them into a safe place. And that's where everything kind of starts to happen. One of Immortan Joe's hench people sees that this is happening, that the war rig has kind of gone off path, and it's then a chase to get her, and he sees that she's taken the wives, so it's to get them back and to punish her.
I think it's his son who
is it his son?
Spots him. It's his little kind of, I don't know, deformed kind of son who looks out the telescope, and then he's got the big, I think it's like Nathan Jones plays him, like the big son who's
right.
they kind of almost do a Master Blaster thing, but not really.
Gigantic dumb thug and wise little person. Yeah. So those are his sons, and who knows how many other children he has. And so it's really just a chase to get them back. And one of the people going to get him is played by Nicholas Hoult, who's awesome in this. He's so good. Yeah. And he is the one who has Max as a blood bag, and he's taken his blood bag with him, strapped to the front of the car, so that he can go and drive. And his mentality is, if I can die serving Immortan Joe, then I will be sent off to Valhalla and, a blaze of glory. And he gets excited when Immortan Joe looks at him. He's like, he looked at me, he looked in my eyes. And everyone's just like, no, he was just looking at the direction that he was going.
Your blood bag. Is he was looking at your blood bag.
He's looking at your blood bag. Yeah. So, it's really fascinating. He has a great turn because once he realizes that Immortan Joe does not care about him and he will not be going to Valhalla, as he has been planning to do, he really turns against Immortan Joe and helps out the women and Max. Yeah. It's really
he realizes
an incredible turn.
Well, he realizes, and I think this is part of the reason why this movie was nominated for so many Oscars.
It won
did so incredibly
6.
Well. Yeah. Won 6 Oscars, but I think was really considered an early frontrunner for Best Picture. Like, this could have won Best Picture.
Right. And when you look at the 2016 Academy Awards to see what other movies were, The Revenant is what beat it out for Best Picture, amongst some other awards. But there were some pretty amazing movies that were awesome there. Tom Hardy was actually nominated for Best Supporting Actor for The Revenant.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it was a huge year for movies, I feel.
Well, we're on Tom Hardy, and this is brief tangent, but I don't know if we've discussed it. Have you seen Venom?
I have seen Venom.
What did you think?
It was fine.
I was pleasantly surprised.
He was really good. He was really good. Michelle Williams is always good, but her wig was really whack. I did not love that. Yeah.
I saw that, and then while we're on the DC tangent, Shazam.
I watched it.
Highly recommend.
So I watched that.
Did you watch it on the plane?
I watched it on the plane going to and from Hawaii on our trip because I was traveling with a 2-year-old. I watched that movie over the course of 10 hours, having to pause periodically, which was a lot of fun.
And it's the kind of movie that you can do that with. But I enjoyed Shazam quite a bit. Anyway, back from the DC tangent. So Fury Road, I think one of the most impressive things about Fury Road, other than the fact that it doesn't let up like for 30 minutes. Like, it starts and then is just like full speed for 30 minutes when there's a brief pause and you're like, oh, I can breathe again. But aside from that, like,
and during those beats between all the action are some like really incredible moments, some very emotional moments that are just you can't take your eyes off the screen the entire time. This is not a fiddle around on your phone movie. This is I'd say this is probably the most beautiful movie I've ever seen. It is absolutely stunning.
Wow.
Well, I mean,
I agree.
Yeah, the cinematography and the fact that because I think this one lost to The Revenant for cinematography.
It must have won editing, right?
It won editing.
Like sound.
It won sound editing. Let me pull up the whole list because it's.
Yeah.
I agree with with every one of these wins. I feel like it should have won everything it was nominated for. It was probably.
I mean, when I really.
Go ahead.
When I think about it, when I think about it, it's the one movie. It's one of the few movies that I feel like I'm like, I wouldn't mind watching that again. I wouldn't mind coming back to it. And I do remember, by the way, where I saw Fury Road for the first time. It's the only Mad Max movie I've seen in the theater.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And I can tell you, I saw the first. I remember seeing Road Warrior and Mad Max around the time that I was working. I worked for a printing company in New York City, AEC Repro, and I remember that some of the guys I worked with were liked it and were talking about it, and we like to talk movies a lot. And I was like, I haven't seen it, so I'm pretty sure that Mark Newcomb, one of my coworkers at the time, lent me his copy of it. I want to say at least the Road Warrior, if not Road Warrior and Mad Max. Either that or I may have actually like Netflixed them, like gotten the discs because it was that long ago. But I remember seeing those around that time. So 2006, 2007, 2008. And Fury Road saw it when I was living in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and I want to make sure I get the movie theater title right, but it's a historic theater off of Prospect Park, and I just want to make sure I get the name right. I want to say it was the Park Cinemas, and I don't know if it's the Park Slope Pavilion. Pavilion. And I remember we saw a few movies while we were living over there, but really kind of like definitely old school. I don't know if they've done anything since we lived there in 2015, but I remember seeing Mad Max there after it had been in theaters for some time, so I didn't see it in 3D.
I might have seen it in 3D. I can't remember.
Did you see it like relatively soon after it came out?
Oh, probably opening weekend.
Yeah, so then you probably saw it in 3D. So, but I definitely wanted to see it in, it was the Park Slope Pavilion. That was where I saw Mad Max Fury Road. But I definitely knew it was something that I had to see in the theater. And that was going to be worth seeing in the theater.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to go back to all of its Academy Award wins, it won for Best Achievement in Film Editing. And that's Margaret Sixel, who is married to George Martin. And I remember... George Martin. Oh my God.
George Miller?
I am all over the place right now in my brain.
Well, John, you haven't been, in full disclosure, John has been a bit under the weather. So
this is true.
Let's give him a break.
George Miller. I'm getting over a cold. Plus I haven't slept in like a week because of my out of whack toddler's sleep schedule going crazy. George Miller. So sorry about that. Babe, Pig in the City
She
fans.
doesn't know what, she's on Hawaii time. She spent a week with her crazy cousin.
Yeah.
My daughter.
So Margaret Sixel, who's George Miller's wife, I read that he wanted her especially to edit it because he didn't want a male editor to edit it, because then it would just look and feel like every other action movie out there. And clearly that decision was a wise one. Best achievement in costume design, and that's Jenny Beavan, who I remember reading a lot about because I am vegan, and I hear a lot about vegan news, and she is vegan. And to the Oscars, she wore a vegan leather jacket with it almost looks bedazzled, but she is a costume designer, so I'd say it's more professionally done than being bedazzled. But the like a Morton Joe symbol on the back, and it was this big thing that she wore this vegan leather jacket, and it makes me wonder how much of the costumes are animal and cruelty free on the Mad Max set. Hard to say.
Well, you have to wonder, though, where in this post-apocalyptic wasteland would you be getting clothing from? I would imagine most of it would be metal.
Yeah. Well,
really, what would have survived the apocalypse?
I also did read that the costume designer for Road Warrior was inspired by an S&M shop that was near her home. So I'm sure there was a lot of leather in that one. So
always be open to inspiration. It can come from anywhere.
So this it also won for makeup and hairstyling, for sound mixing, sound editing, production design. As we mentioned, it lost for Best Picture to Revenant. It was nominated. George Miller was nominated for directing, cinematography. John Seale was nominated, and it was nominated for visual effects. And I'd say extremely rightfully so, although I feel like it should have won only because allegedly, according to George Miller, 90% of it was practical effects. And you watch videos online about like the making of that movie, and you see the stuff that they're doing.
Oh yeah.
And it's just
what beat that for best visual effects?
That's a good question. I will look that up right now. Let's see. 2016 Academy Award winners. So let's see. Best director was for The Revenant. Cinematography, The Revenant. Visual effects, Ex Machina. Was that visual effects that I said?
Oh, I believe so.
Yeah, visual effects, Ex Machina, which...
Oh, okay.
I mean, a strong contender. I don't know if I would have gone that way necessarily, but I mean, clearly I'm a huge Mad Max Fury Road fan, so...
But then I think your visual effects in a movie like Fury Road are really created more so by the editor, by I think more by your editors than you don't have a visual effects team per se. I mean, I know they had a visual effects team.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like it, it's not like you're entirely creating something using a computer. I don't know.
I think that most of it was...
It's a very backhanded compliment.
Yeah, I think that most of it was altering... I think that some of the shots showing like the sky at nighttime were digitally done. Also, Charlize Theron's arm.
Oh, yeah.
That's all done digitally. And there's a very memorable shot of a car kind of blowing up in a steering wheel with the Immortan Joe symbol flying towards the screen, which I'm sure in 3D was a lot of fun.
Oh, this must have been insane in 3D. And by the way, can we talk about Charlize Theron for a moment? Because is there anything... She's like the new Meryl Streep.
She's incredible.
She can't do.
There's nothing she can't do. She's incredible.
And going back to... I don't know if most people realize that Charlize Theron has been... a big name in movies for over 20 years.
Well, she co-starred alongside our boy Keanu Reeves in The Devil's Advocate.
Yeah, Devil's Advocate, and Al Pacino.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Devil's Advocate.
She was probably third on the call sheet.
Yeah. She did Mighty Joe Young. I never saw it, but sure. Mighty Joe Young with Bill Paxton.
She was in That Thing You Do.
She was in That Thing You Do. But then, like, you ever see Monster, where she plays Eileen Wuornos, the serial killer? Mm-hmm. My God, she's amazing. She's amazing in that, and in North Country.
I didn't see North Country.
North Country, and it was not the type of thing where I was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm totally jazzed to watch North Country.
She was also great recently in The Long Shot.
Oh, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. And she popped up. She was in Fast and the Furious.
Oh, yeah.
8,
I forgot about that.
But, like, so I love the versatility. She is such a badass, and she's so funny, though. You mentioned The Long Shot, such a funny movie.
Yeah.
And she clicks so great, and she just seems like, I have a lot of respect for Charlize Theron.
And then she was also in, like, Atomic Blonde, which, if you look at the movies that we're talking about right now, I mean, it's clear that she can do action.
And she likes it. She respects it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And anyway, we could probably talk for a few more hours just about Fury Road. But
damn, like the message in it it goes to show Mad Max definitely has a place in our landscape, in our cultural landscape. Yeah. Fury Road more than showed that. And I know that George Miller has been working on developing I want to say that they're actually prequels to Fury Road, one focusing on Max and one focusing on Furiosa.
Right. So I believe that Tom Hardy signed a 3-picture deal.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was before Fury Road, like including Fury Road, or after.
Including Fury Road. If I understand correctly.
I feel like, based on the reaction to that movie, nobody is upset about this. It's just like...
well, I remember initially Tom Hardy regretted signing a 3-picture deal after filming the movie, but then he saw the movie, and as soon as he saw it, he was like, when do we start?
Right. Well, I think it was at Cannes when maybe it premiered at Cannes, and he was like, I have to apologize to George Miller because I didn't understand what he was going for, and I was really pissy on set and didn't get it. And Charlize Theron, I think, also was on record saying that she wasn't quite sure what he was going for, but then saw the movie and was like, okay, yes, absolutely yes.
Really a masterpiece. I would say the best of the franchise, and it's a standard bearer, if you will.
Well, I think that's an easy call, considering, we didn't grow up as much on the originals. I had seen the first one and maybe Beyond Thunderdome on TV or something, but they weren't really part of our lives growing up.
No.
And Fury Road was kind of like the entry into that world, and then can go back and be like, oh yeah, okay, now I get it.
Now, to contrast that, for our next episode, we're going to be focusing on a movie that was very much a part of our childhoods.
Yeah, we'll get to that soon. But before we do that,
I thought you were giving me like the go home cue.
No. Run Home Jack. No. What I want to know is, okay, we know that there's going to be prequels. What would you want to see?
Oh, our ideas.
World? Yeah.
Oh my God. I feel so. It's kind of like there's certain films that like they belong to a certain filmmaker. So for me, imagining a Mad Max, outside of George Miller's head is a little challenging, but I know that they were developing a television series at one point, and then it fell through. But I think that maybe doing, and I'm not thinking like a weekly television series, but I'm thinking like an anthology series, almost like you could do it like a Fargo. where maybe it's set in this post-apocalyptic world. You could spin off Westworld. You could do like, you know, I wonder if you could, I mean,
Wasteland
you know,
World.
Well, you could do, you know, this kind of like a Westworld. Well, like there was a Westworld spinoff called Future World. It was a sequel to the original movie Westworld called Future World. So if HBO were looking to spin off Westworld, I could easily imagine them doing like a post-apocalyptic version of it where it's like, hey, you know, you're going to get to live in the wasteland for a week and just kind of show different people's experiences of that. You could have a series where it's because Max is kind of this reluctant hero who's really just like his goal is survival. And along the way, if he can help, if he ends up in the position, he'll help other people out. He's like a one-man A-team in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. So maybe you just have him doing that. I think an anime series.
Oh.
I think maybe partially, I might have been partially inspired by the news this week of Kevin Smith's He-Man Revelations.
We didn't talk about that. Of course.
No, that's why I threw it in. I was like, oh, forgot that there. But you know, and which promises to tie back to storylines from the original animated series. I'm excited about that.
Right.
But I think like if you were to do a dark like anime series, whether it's a series of features or you know, a series of, you know, 45, you know, to 60-minute episodes, I think it could be really interesting. I think, you know, especially compared to when George Miller was originally developing a Mad Max television series, the rules have changed. Television has changed, and you could make it. And honestly, I would go more of like the noir. I would go almost more in the style of the Mel Gibson Mad Max movies, and leave that Fury Road style for the big screen.
Yeah.
But like an anime, like a cool anime version of Mad Max in serial format, not breakfast cereal.
Okay. So I think that's the way I would go too.
What do you,
Yeah. So I've got a couple things. One of them is more of a side story, but the main thing is I'd love to see a Thunderdome series. You know, it's like this Thunderdome exists. It's not like Max and Master Blaster were the only ones to ever go in there. So it'd be fun to kind of be in that world. It could be animated. That would be a lot of fun, but doesn't necessarily need to be.
What if you made it kind of like what if you did it like an American Gladiators, or you did like a competition show, and it's but it's like, you know, cosplayers. And I know in your interview with Faye that, you know, cosplay comes into it, but imagine if you set up a Thunderdome where you have, you know, and I mean, I guess they wouldn't fight to the death. Then it's the Running Man. But Thunderdome, or you could just go back and watch all the great War Games matches from WCW and NWA.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is how when I was in college, I lived with this guy, great guy named Chris Hale. Dan, you know Chris Hale. Chris currently, I believe, actually is in the I don't know exactly what the terminology would be, but independent wrestling world. I don't know what the proper moniker is.
That's independent wrestling scene, the indie circuit. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of like non-professional, professional wrestling. So it's very sensational. And he has a character that is, I don't know if he actually wrestles or if he is just a character in this world. But yeah, go ahead and look it up. And
what's his character?
I forget what the name is, but if you just look up Chris Hale wrestling, I'm sure you can find it. So he and I were writing some sketches at one point, and we had this storyline for this team of post-apocalyptic doctors called the Thunderdocs. And it took place in the Mad Max world, and it was, like everyone's wearing leather, and it's in the sandy dunes somewhere, and some, like, maybe they go village to village. And what's interesting is that in Fury Road, there is a doctor who is part of the world. So when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, it's a Thunderdoc. Thunderdoc. I would love to see Thunderdocs. I'd love to see the world of medicine in post-apocalyptic wasteland. So that's that. Were you able to find anything?
No.
All right. Well, if I can find something, I'll include a link in the episode description. But
looking up somebody in wrestling by their real name is sometimes very challenging.
I know I'll be able to find it, but I'll put a link to some of his stuff in the episode description. Anyway.
Excellent. One more thing I have to say I love about Fury Road is that in their pursuit of Furiosa, Immortan Joe's caravan has a awesome guitar player, phantom giant guitar player in front of this wall of speakers.
I was actually kind of wondering if we were going to be the first podcast to talk about Fury Road that didn't mention him.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't let it go because every time I watch the movie, I forget that it's coming, and then I see it, and I'm just like, that's amazing.
It's so awesome. Cool. Yeah, it's this caravan with all these people drumming, and then this guy with a flame-throwing guitar. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of like if Slash became a mutant, like an X-Man. If that would be him.
It's incredible. So, Dan, why don't you talk about what we're going to be doing on the next episode, and then I'll lead us into our interview with Faye.
Great, John. So for our next episode, this one, if you want to do, you might need to do some research on this one and check it out if you have about 80 minutes to spare and won't miss those 80 minutes. Transylvania 5000 from 1985, kind of a cult classic, starring Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis, Ed Begley Jr., Norman Fell, Carol Kane. It might be a little hard to find.
You can find it on iTunes, I believe.
Okay.
If you're looking, it's completely bonkers. We'll have plenty to say about it on the next episode.
We watched it many, many times growing up.
Yeah, I'd say that would have been a contender to be stuck in the first VCR. If you are familiar with some of our past episodes, if you've been listening for a while, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
It could have been Transylvania 5000, right on.
It easily could have been. So yeah, I'm excited about that one, and please keep on listening. What you're about to hear is an interview I did with Faye Murman. Faye has directed this documentary called Humungus, and we're going to put a link to that in the episode description. Humungus, as Faye will describe in further detail, it focuses a lot on Mad Max extreme fandom and cosplay, focusing specifically on this guy named Jim Tank, in quotes, Dorsey, who portrays the Lord Humungus in the world of Mad Max fandom. And kind of a celebrity in that world. Yeah, so thanks for listening to the episode. Good journey, Dan. And this is our interview. This is our interview with Faye.
Enjoy.
So, Faye, tell me how you got yourself mixed up in the world of Mad Max.
One day, it was totally unplanned or unexpected. I was doing a story for the station I worked for in Manhattan, and they sent me to a media day for a convention on Long Island, and I met a man dressed as the Lord Humungus from Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. I did not know who he was dressed up as. I didn't know the character's name. I said think my opening question to him on camera was, "Who the hell are you and why are you naked?" And he explained who he was and
Why he was naked.
And I just found this particular person incredibly fascinating. And what I thought would be a 3-minute video for my station turned into a 2.5-year project around the world in my first feature film.
Which is so cool. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the character that he is portraying, why he is portraying that character, who he is?
Sure.
Give me some information.
Yeah. So you're going to need a lot of information.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this is going to make no sense.
Right.
So his name is Jim Dorsey. Everybody calls him Tank. The tagline of the film is, by day, he's Jim the Pool Guy. By night, he's Lord of the Wasteland. So Tank is a part of just a hardcore group of Mad Max fans. And Tank is 47. When he was 40, he decided to turn himself into a bodybuilder just so he could cosplay Shel Nilsson's character, Lord Humungus from Mad Max 2.
So he was just a diehard Mad Max Road Warrior fan.
Yes. So Tank got exposed to the Road Warrior kind of briefly when it came out. He had strict parents. He wasn't really allowed to see it, but he knew that it was his favorite movie before he ever saw it. And he knew that that's the world that he always wanted to live in. And when he was finally allowed to see it, his little Tank mind was blown, and he just snowballed into this extreme fandom for the rest of his life.
Wow.
And he became a cosplayer. He always liked to make costumes, and he became a cosplayer later in life. And he was at this post-apocalyptic festival in California called Wasteland Weekend, which is incredible. And one year, one of his friends said, "Hey, next year you should come back as Lord Humungus. You're the only guy that could pull it off." He was beefy. He was built, but not like toned like a Shel Nilsson, for those that don't know, was a Swedish bodybuilder when he played the Lord Humungus. So he was ripped. And within 1 year, Tank's going to hear this and get mad at me for getting the numbers wrong, but he was way up there in the 200s, and then he dropped down to like 205 pounds and became this like ripped, lean, mean fighting machine, shaved his entire body, and made a surprise appearance at Wasteland Weekend of 2011, and he's just been a cult hero ever since.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So before this, what was your knowledge of like the Mad Max universe?
Super limited, basically Thunderdome, a little bit of just muscle cars. I had a very narrow-minded view of Mad Max. I'd seen a couple of them. Enough things stood out to me culturally. I think I just caught them on television here and there, just glimpses of them. Like Kundalini's character from Mad Max 1 stuck out to me, the character with the red heart glasses and the red leather suit. Fifi the boss with the shaved head stuck out to me. So different characters always stuck out to me, but the thing that turned me off from Mad Max, and this is something I've actually been able to talk to with all the actors from Mad Max 1 and 2 at this point, is that the version we saw in the United States was dubbed, and it was poorly dubbed. And for the longest time, I didn't think I liked Mad Max because I didn't think I was smart enough to understand it. But it just turns out I couldn't hear it.
It was dubbed just because of accents?
The studios were convinced that Americans couldn't understand the Australian accents, so it was poorly dubbed. And that was the version that most Americans had access to for the longest time. And for some reason, it just couldn't click in my brain. I couldn't hear it. I hated it. Then I saw, once I started the movie, I watched Mad Max 1, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And of course, I've seen The Road Warrior 9,000 times, and I can tell you anything you want to know about that movie. Anything.
So you went from someone who had very limited knowledge of these movies in the first place to somebody who it's become such a big part of your life. This is your first feature film. It's based on not the movies per se,
right,
but
the love of the movies.
The love of the movies and the fandom, which is a really interesting angle.
Yeah.
What has that journey been like for you?
Without a doubt, it's completely changed my life in every aspect you could ever imagine. When I first met Tank, I thought this would be a 3-minute video, and then he called me one day. We started shooting right away. I met him on a Wednesday. We started shooting on a Saturday, and I knew right then and there he wasn't going to flake out. I felt right away that this documentary was going to click. So many others had fallen by the wayside because people flaked out, And I'm giving you a little backstory. And I forget what I was saying. What were we talking about?
You were talking about how when you first met Tank.
Well, how has this been for me?
Yeah.
How has this changed my life? Right. You still jet lagged, by the way. I'm from New York and I'm very, very tired. So yeah, I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't know anything about this kind of fandom and the events that go on all around the world. But now I have this total appreciation for fast cars and how to build cars and how to make cars, and I have an appreciation for how to make costumes and not just make them, but make them well. The people in this film, as a sidebar, do it so well. They rebuild the vehicles and remake the costumes so well that George Miller has seen photos and thought they were stills from his movies. There's no exaggeration. So I started going to events like Wasteland Weekend, and I've been to Australia a couple of times, and I'm friends with the cast of Mad Max 1 and 2. Like,
that's crazy.
Buddies with a lot of them. It's opened me up to so many new things and so many new experiences. I never would say I was timid, but God, if I'm not the most outrageously outgoing human being at this point, give me like a muscle car in the desert.
To be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and now you yourself have then begun to participate alongside Tank and his crew. So you were just kind of starting to say that it's really brought you out of your shell, whatever shell you had, you're now completely out of it. So how has that been, and how has that transformed your life outside of Mad Max?
Yeah, I didn't think I had a shell. I really didn't, but apparently I did. It was a thin one, but now that I'm out of it, like, life is great. Everything just feels like it's at your fingertips. Something about living in a post-apocalyptic world, even just for a little bit, makes you feel so bold and just carefree, and it makes you feel like, whatever, I can do anything. I can do this, I can do that. I survived, a week in the desert in leather jackets. I can do this. It's fine. So it's changed my life in ways. I would say almost immediately when I first started filming these events, I wished that I wasn't filming them at all because I really wanted to participate in them. But of course, obviously, I filmed everything. There's so many visual things going on, just scantily clad men and women and fast cars and just beautiful landscapes. And it's breathtaking. And I'm talking about the Mojave Desert and the Australian outback, and even crazy conventions like Dragon Con in Atlanta where like world-class costume makers go and just party for 5 days. It's amazing. It made me appreciate cosplay, which I never appreciated before, because I thought I had a very limited exposure and understanding of that. You kind of clump it in with mostly anime stuff, and
sure.
But when you put your heart and soul into it, you can recreate something and relive something. And all these people have become my friends, and now I do participate in these things. My friend Max in Detroit builds all of our Mad Max cars, and we flew out to Detroit last January. We interviewed him a little bit, but then we just hung out. We played Dungeons and Dragons. He taught me how to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Fun.
Yeah, and I actually love it.
So do you feel like by becoming kind of one of them, it helped, break down barriers as a filmmaker and with these people as the subjects, or did that not really come into play at all?
I don't think it really had to come into play. They really welcomed me with open arms from the very beginning. They gave me a nickname, my first Wasteland, which is a big deal, and it's an honor. It must mean they like you. I was never really treated like an outsider by any of them, and then when they saw that I kept coming back and I really wasn't bringing all my camera gear, they knew that I was just in it. I have people in this community that they call me their sister, and I would absolutely call them my brother. And we know that we can lean on each other, even though we live all over the world. We live in Japan, Australia, Detroit, the East Coast, West Coast. We live all over the world, but we know that we can call on each other. And gaining that kind of global friendship has been really just mind expanding and really heartwarming.
And are you able to tell us what the nickname is that they gave you?
Sure. It's Dust Eye, because my first Wasteland Weekend, a tremendously terrible sandstorm blew through, and I filmed in it. And I wasn't being totally an idiot, but I was kind of being an idiot because your camera in a sandstorm, and my camera kind of jammed up with sand and stopped working. And it's kind of a funny story because Wasteland Weekend is fully immersive, and you have to dress up and look the part. Even the media, we have to all look like we lived through nuclear warfare, and now we're the last human beings on Earth in the middle of the desert. It's fully immersive. It's fully themed. Once you pay for your ticket, and unless you want to buy merchandise from the merch stand, you don't pay for money for anything. You pay in bottle caps or you barter. People bring things that they make, jewelry, clothing. It's a really immersive and really just believable world. And my camera stopped working, and I was brand new to this whole community, and I was basically on the verge of tears. And I ran over to my friend Max, and he's like, he's trying to help me because he's pretty good with that stuff. And he's like, go to there's a command center, like a radio control room. Like,
of course there is.
Go find a man called the Swede, and the Swede's going to help you. And I walk through the town in Wasteland City, and I open these curtains, and I'm in this really weird place, and I'm like, I'm looking for the Swede. Like, oh, that's me, I'm the Swede. And he took apart my camera, put it back together, and fixed it. And that's when my friend Max called me Dust Eye.
Nice. Did Max get into it because his name is Max?
No, that's Max. Max's name is Dave. That's how into Mad Max is.
How many people would you say attend the Wasteland Weekend?
Wasteland Weekend has 4,000 attendees, and they've capped it at 4,000. But they don't want it to get any bigger.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is gigantic. But you know what? It feels like the smallest little gathering. It feels so intimate. There's nothing. There's like no throngs of humanity. Everybody's just. It's almost a utopia. I'm sure some people have had maybe some different experiences, but for me, it's almost a utopia. Everybody's there to help you and be your friend. One guy last year watched me get burned. I hopped out of one of our trucks, and all of the trucks have piping hot exposed exhaust pipes coming out of everywhere because they're insane apocalypse cars. And I reached into the flatbed to grab something, and my elbow touched a exhaust pipe, and I shouted, and like the flesh melted off my arm. And this guy in the shade across the way said, "Hey, you get burned? Come on over here. I got burn cream." And I came over, and he gave me burn cream, and I was like, "Hey, I got a beer in the fridge in the RV." He's like, "Well, I don't drink. Thank you." And I said, "Well, I've got a banana. You want a banana?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll take a banana." So we swapped burn cream for a banana, and that to me is, I think, the fundamental thing about Wasteland Weekend. Everybody's just out there it's the end of the world, and we're all just being good to each other.
Yeah, and potassium efficient.
It's very.
So I'm trying to decide if I want to ask you. Okay, I'm going to ask you first about the documentary a little bit more. So what got you to actually decide, I'm going to go ahead and I'm really just going to go for it and make this documentary? Like, how did that happen? Yeah,
so I think I was kind of saying this before, and then my mind switched tracks. Shocker. Tank and I met on a Wednesday, started filming on a Saturday, and then we made plans the next weekend for me to come up. I lived in Queens. He lives in northern New Jersey, and it's like an hour and a half. And in New York, especially as a journalist, but I'm just going to go ahead and say probably almost any career, you don't really get many days off. I maybe had one day off a week from my newsroom, and I was spending that one day a week driving an hour and a half up to Tank's, filming all day, driving back an hour and a half, and then waking up and working 6 days in a row where I drive and film. And one day Tank calls me very quickly after meeting him, maybe within a week. He said, "By the way, I know you said you only want to come up for a weekend, but here's what I do all year long." He said, "Do you want to come to Australia with me?" And without even knowing anything else about it, I said, "Hell yeah, I want to come to Australia with you." He's like, "Oh, and we do this event called Wasteland Weekend, and I go to this big event in Atlanta called Dragon Con, and I do all this other really," and he didn't say this was interesting, but it sounded really visually interesting. "I do all this stuff around the country and around the world all year long." And I thought, okay, well, let's start shooting. Let's see if this is really going to play out. Let's see how I do. And we started filming in June, and by Labor Day, I had quit my job in Manhattan and had the luxury of being able to move back home temporarily.
Right.
I'm really lucky in that regard. And just move back home and make this movie because there was no possible way. One, the footage was already starting to suffer for me being exhausted, coming up there one day a week and being wiped out. Two, there's no way you're ever going to get, I think I needed like 8 weeks off total for the year. There's no way. And then there's no way I can fly to Australia paying Queen's rent. There's just no way. So it all made sense to quit my job that I wasn't very happy with.
Right.
Move home. And I had a 2-year plan. I said I would be home for 2 years, make the movie for 2 years, and then get back to New York. And it took me 2.5 years, but that's what happened.
Wow.
But I think I stayed pretty close to schedule.
Yeah. And then you did some sort of crowdfunding to raise money for it?
Some very humble crowdfunding because good Lord, I should have asked for, quadruple what I asked for. We asked for a very, very, very small amount, thinking that, just not being presumptuous, that people want to give their hard-earned money away to us, especially for a project they really hadn't, it was just on spec at this point. But we asked for $3,000, which I think was pretty much just going to cover the new microphones I had to buy.
Yeah.
And we raised $6,000.
Oh, that's great.
And then we did a second fundraiser, which I think we raised another $1,000 for, just to get us to Australia, because we premiered a part of the film in Australia this past February in the same theater that premiered Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior.
Whoa, that's special.
It was really special. It was, by that point, I'm now a fan of Mad Max, so it was special for me. But it was more special for me because I know how special it was for Tank and all of our friends like Max and everybody, to know that a movie about.
Sorry, Max.
Sorry, Max, little Maxaroni. I know how special it was for them to have a movie about their Mad Max fandom premiere on that screen.
Yeah, that's huge. That's the dream.
Yeah, it really, really is.
So, as this podcast is about movie sequels, prequels, remakes, reboots, we got to talk a little bit about Fury Road. How does the diehard Mad Max community feel about that movie? That, I mean, for me, I think it's one of the best movies of the past, 15 years maybe. But for people who live in that world, what's it like for them?
Obsessed.
Good. That makes me really happy because it's so fantastic. And you want a movie that's that good just in general to be accepted by the people who care so deeply for that universe.
Right.
And, this podcast is called Ruined Childhoods because, the joke is that people always say like, oh no, my childhood is ruined, boo-hoo.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was a lot of that when it was announced that there was going to be another Mad Max movie. And it I don't know, warms my heart that people embrace it in that community.
Well, George Miller is a master at what he does. Now, but what I like about it the most is that he was not, when he started out, he was a dentist.
Oh, yeah?
Dr. Miller. And he just made this just kind of for fun, just to see if he could. He had no budget. They didn't know what they were doing. They ran out of money. He cut it together himself at his kitchen table. Mad Max 1 is the most homegrown movie of all time, and it's beloved and it's iconic. And it makes you feel like, and I think that should be something that every filmmaker should hold on to, thinking about that.
Yeah, the first Mad Max movie, it's definitely, it's not polished.
No.
It feels like a labor of love.
Yes.
And it's, by today's standards, people could see it and think like, it's slow and there's, kind of confused and whatever. But like what that kind of started, it's really something special.
Well, when George Miller and Byron Kennedy came around for The Road Warrior, I think they had their shit figured out. And then it kind of got taken away in Thunderdome. It's not that it wasn't a good movie. It's just that, Byron Kennedy tragically passed away. He was George Miller's production partner. He passed away in a helicopter accident, location scouting.
Oh, really? Oof.
And actually, Thunderdome was supposed to be, I told you I could tell you anything. Thunderdome was supposed to be Lord of the Flies.
Really?
That's why all the kids are in it.
No way.
And then Byron Kennedy passed away, and George Miller he got obviously just devastated and heartbroken, and the project kind of slipped through his fingers a little bit, and it kind of got Americanized. And George Miller was just very sad during that, and you could tell that his heart wasn't in it like it was for Road Warrior. But then he came back all these years later with Fury Road, and just blew everybody's minds.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey, remember me? Like, look what I can do. I know I did Babe 2, Pig in the City or whatever." But
Right. So before we wrap up, where can people find out what's going on, the latest news with the doc?
Sure. So we have a website, humungusdoc.com, but it's spelled like the character's name. So it's HUMUNGUSDOC.com. You can check us out also on Facebook, facebook.com/humungusdoc.
Cool. And we'll put links to those in the episode's description. Faye, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
the sign.